Okay, the next story is Snow White and Rose Red. Once upon a time there was a poor widow who had two good and cheerful daughters. They were named Snow White and Rose Red, after the blooms on the two rose trees at the front of their cottage. The girls were the best of friends and did everything together. At playtime they would run through the meadow finding flowers for their mother, or they would frolic in the forest gathering berries and making friends with all the woodland creatures. When it was time for their chores, they worked to keep their mother's cottage neat and tidy. On summer mornings, Rose made a wreath of flowers to lay on her mother's bed. On winter evenings, Snow White lit the fire and hung the brightly polished kettle to warm. The sisters would sit by the fire, holding hands while their mother read to them. Every night before going to bed, Snow White said, "We must always be together." Her sister replied, "As long as we live." Hi, Mitz. Good boy, Lucky. Let's go to the next page. Their mother would add, "What one has, she must share with the other." One evening, as they were reading by the fire, someone knocked at the door. Rose Red eagerly jumped up to answer it, but when she unbolted the door, a big black bear nosed his way into their cottage. Rose Red was startled and ran, Snow White to cover under her mother's bed. What they didn't know that this was no ordinary bear. He began to speak. "Please don't be afraid," he said. "I mean you no harm. I'm half frozen and only wish to get warm." "Poor bear," said the mother. "Lie down by the fire, but be careful not to burn your coat." Then she called, "Snow White, Rose Red, come out. The bear is our guest and our friend." So the sisters came out and soon grew comfortable with their new furry friend. They even made a fun routine of his nightly visits. He would come at the same time each night, and they would bring out the broom and sweep the snow from his coat. Then he would stretch out by the fire and let out a great yawn, but the sisters wouldn't let him sleep right away. They tugged his fur, rolled him. Oh, there they are. Look, and they both have baby dolls. They both rolled him about and took turns riding on his back. He would pretend to growl, and they would laugh. Sometimes they were too rough with the bear, and he said, "Please let me live. Are you trying to beat your suitor to death?" When the snow began to melt away, the early spring flowers were popping through the soil. The bear announced to Snow White that it was time for him to go away for a while. This made her very sad because she had grown rather fond of the bear. "I must leave you until the leaves fall from the trees," he said. "Then I will return to continue our courtship." Snow White laughed and blushed. "But where are you going?" she asked. "I must return to the forest to protect my treasure from the wicked dwarfs," he explained. "When the earth is frozen, they must stay underground in their caves, but in the spring, they break through to the surface and search for treasure." They said their goodbyes, and the bear trotted across the yard and was soon out of sight. A few days later, their mother sent Snow White and Rose Red to the forest to collect firewood. They walked until they found a great tree that had fallen across a stream. Near the base of the tree, the sisters spotted something moving. As they got closer, there they are, they saw that it was an old dwarf with a long white beard. The end of his beard was caught in the tree. "Well, don't just stand there, you silly girls," shouted the dwarf. "Help me." The girls were shocked to hear him speak to them that way, but they tried in vain to pull him free. "How did you ever get yourself caught in a tree?" asked Rose Red. "What's it to you, anyway?" snarled the dwarf. "Well, I should go find someone to help," she said. "Why?" asked the dwarf. "You two are already too many for me. Can't you senseless geese think of something?" "Don't be so impatient," said Snow White. "I have an idea." She pulled her scissors from her pocket and cut off the end of the dwarf's beard. "You're more stupid than I thought," said the dwarf. "Cutting a piece from my fine beard will give you bad luck for a year." Then the dwarf grabbed a small sack filled with gold which had been lying in the roots of the tree. He ran off with it slung over his shoulder. So Snow White and Rose Red gathered some firewood and headed back home. They followed the stream until they saw something moving. As they came nearer, they found the dwarf jumping about like a grasshopper. "Well, don't just stand there, you foolish girls," shouted the dwarf. "Help me. This pesky fish at the end of my line wants to pull me in. I would let him go, but the wind has gotten my beard tangled in my line." The sisters grabbed hold of the little man and tried in vain to free his beard from the snow line. Snow White quickly brought out her scissors and cut the beard loose. When the dwarf saw that what she had done, he screamed, Are you crazy? It wasn't enough that you snipped off the end of my beard. Now you had to cut the best part of it. Your bad luck will never end." Then he picked up a sack of pearls from the tall grass, and without another word he dragged it away. The next day the sisters went to the town to buy needles and thread for their mother. They soon noticed a large bird circling high above their heads. The bird swooped down, and they heard a loud cry. The girls ran over and saw the eagle held their old acquaintance, the dwarf, in its talons, and was trying to carry him off. There's that picture. They took hold of him and pulled against the eagle so that it finally let go of his prey. "Couldn't you have been more careful?" cried the dwarf. "You practically pulled my coat apart, you clumsy creatures." Then he grabbed a sack full of valuable stones and crept under a rock and into his cave. The sisters, who were used to his thankfulness, continued on to town. On their way home, they surprised the dwarf, who had emptied his bag of gems out onto the road. The sun lit up the brilliant stones, and they glittered and sparkled so beautifully that the girls stood still and stared at them. "Get away from here, you dreadful beings," said the dwarf in a rage. Suddenly, a loud bellowing came from the forest, and a black bear came trotting toward them. The terrified dwarf leapt up and ran, but he could not reach his cave in time. He cried out, "Dear Mr. Bear, please spare my life. I will give you all these beautiful jewels. You don't want to eat me anyway. Take these 2 tasty girls instead." The bear gave the wicked creature a single strike with his paw, and he did not move again. The sisters started to run, but the bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, don't be afraid." They recognized their friend's voice and turned to see that his bearskin had disappeared. Standing in the bear's place was a handsome man, clothed all in gold. "I am a king's son," he said, "and that wicked dwarf who stole my treasures put a curse on me. I had to live the forest as a wild bear until I was freed by his death. Now he has received his fair reward." The prince took Snow White to his kingdom, where he married her, and Rose Red married his brother. They shared the great treasure that the dwarf had collected in his cave. Their mother lived peacefully and happily with her children for many years. She brought the 2 rose trees with her, and they stood before her window. Every year they produced the most beautiful roses, white and red. The end.